For a man who runs a multi-million-dollar company, you're surprisingly incompetent at managing your own life, aren't you, Alexander? The familiar, unspoken accusation, as sharp and unwelcome as the icy wind blowing off Lake Michigan, seemed to hang in the opulent air of the penthouse. It mocked the very control that Alexander Alex Sterling, CEO of Sterling Innovations, had always prided himself on, especially now as he stood silhouetted against the glittering Chicago skyline, waiting. He glanced at the Patek Philippe on his wrist for the third time in 5 minutes. The imminent arrival of the woman he had hired as a makeshift shield seemed less like a solution and more like confirmation of the very incompetence he loathed. Alexander Alex Sterling, the 38-year-old CEO of Sterling Innovations, stood motionless in the minimalist yet sumptuous living room of his penthouse overlooking the glittering Chicago skyline. Skyscrapers streamed in, reflecting off polished ebony floors and cold charcoal gray walls, hung with only a few expensive abstract works of art. He was wearing a perfectly tailored navy blue business suit, but his tie had been loosened slightly. His impatience was evident as he glanced at the white gold Patek Philippe on his wrist for the third time in 5 minutes. His dedicated and efficient executive assistant, Sarah Jenkins, had just announced over the intercom that she had arrived. Alex took a deep breath, trying to contain his irritation. She, the woman he had reluctantly agreed to hire through a discreet arrangement, arranged by Sarah to pose as his fiancée at his brother Michael's wedding this weekend at the posh resort in Lake Forest. In Alex's mind, he pictured someone professional. A little stiff, perhaps, well-dressed, but not flashy. Someone who could recite a script, smile at the right times, and, most importantly, not draw unnecessary attention. He needed a shield, a temporary solution to 2 headaches, the relentless matchmaking of his mother, Eleanor Sterling, and the sure presence of his ambitious ex-girlfriend, Victoria Vance, at the wedding. He needed peace to get through the next 3-day weekend. The soft ding of the private elevator interrupted his thoughts. The shiny metal doors slid open. Sarah stepped out first, her blonde hair neatly tied back, her tablet in hand as usual. She was followed by another woman. Alex turned, ready to give his final instructions in his usual concise, efficient executive style. Then he paused, all the prepared words in his head suddenly gone. The woman standing before him was not stiff, not ordinary, and certainly not unremarkable. She wore a simple dark blue midi dress, no high-end label he recognized, but it perfectly accentuated her slim, shapely figure. Her long, chestnut brown hair, slightly wavy in its natural way, fell to her shoulders, framing an oval face with soft features. She wore no elaborate makeup, just a touch of pale pink lip balm on her lips and a natural flush on her cheeks. But what stunned Alex most were her eyes. Large, clear, forest green eyes that stared straight at him with curiosity, intelligence, and perhaps a touch of challenge. She didn't have the polished beauty of the women he usually saw at social gatherings or boardrooms. Her beauty was fresh, radiant, full of life, and completely natural. Alex Sterling, a man accustomed to controlling everything from multi-million-dollar deals to the pace of meetings, felt for the first time that his perfect plan had suffered a major setback, and the setback was surprisingly beautiful. "Mr. Sterling," Sarah said, breaking the awkward silence. "This is Isabel Rossi." Isabel Rossi held out her hand, a small smile on her lips. "It's nice to meet you, Mr. Sterling. Or should I call you Alex?" Her voice was clear and pleasant. Alex took a second to compose himself, reaching out to shake her slender but not fragile hand. "Alex will do," he replied, his voice a little hoarse than usual. "Thank you for coming, Ms. Rossi." He wondered if her beauty was an asset or a curse to his plan. Just a few days ago, in his modern office with a panoramic view of Lake Michigan, Alex had been pacing like a tiger in a cage. On his computer screen was an email from his mother, Eleanor. Sweet but pressing, she had stumbled upon a couple of lovely, well-bred girls and was looking forward to introducing them to Alex at Michael's wedding. As if that weren't bad enough, Sarah had just confirmed that Victoria Vance, the woman he'd spent nearly 6 months breaking up with, would also be attending as a guest of a distant relative on the bride's side. "I can't take another weekend like this, Sarah," Alex said, sounding exhausted. "My mother will turn Michael's wedding into a fake blind date for me, and Victoria will definitely do everything she can to get attention. I need a solution." "A solution?" Sarah raised her eyebrows, waiting. "A fiancé," Alex announced. "A fake one. Zrenya, just enough to get my mother and Victoria to leave me alone for those 3 days." He looked at Sarah with confidence. "Can you find someone?" Requirements: intelligent, discreet, well-mannered, and absolutely trouble-free. Good pay. Sarah, with her extensive network and incredible problem-solving skills, found Isabel Rossi. Meanwhile, in Wicker Park, far from the glittering financial district, Isabel Izzy Rossi stood frozen in her late grandmother's small, cozy, but run-down used bookstore. In her hand was a letter from the new landlord, a real estate company that had just purchased the building. They had tripled her rent and demanded a large deposit if she wanted to renew her lease on the Story Nook. $15,000, Liam Turner, Izzy's childhood friend and part-time bookstore assistant, exclaimed in horror as he looked at the figure. "Where are we going to get that money, Izzy? The revenue is enough to pay the old rent and the bills." Izzy felt her heart sink. The Story Nook was more than a bookstore, it was her second home, a place filled with memories of her beloved grandmother, who had instilled in her a love of books and art. Losing it was like losing a part of her soul. She was a freelance illustrator, passionate about her work, but with an unstable income, and there was no way she could make that much money in a short time. Just as she was sinking into despair, she received a call from a woman named Sarah Jenkins, an assistant to some CEO. The job offer was strange. Pretend to be her boss's fiancé for a 3-day weekend at a family wedding. And the salary? Exactly $15,000. "No way!" Izzy exclaimed at first. "I'm an artist, not an actress or a prostitute." But the image of the old bookshelves, the smell of damp paper, and the uncertain future of the Story Nook haunted her. After a sleepless night of thinking and a long conversation with Liam, who was initially vehemently opposed but eventually understood her situation, Izzy called Sarah back. She met Sarah at a discreet coffee shop, laying out the terms: a detailed contract outlining roles, responsibilities, hours, salary, and most importantly, no physical contact beyond the necessary social gestures in front of others, and her personal information was to be kept strictly confidential. Sarah, on Alex's behalf, agreed to all the terms. Izzy and Alex's first meeting took place the day before they left for Lake Forest at this very penthouse. Alex, in his usual controlling CEO guise, handed her a thick file of sterling family history, a list of important guests to note, and a line-by-line script about their love at first sight at a charity art auction. An ironic setup. "Just remember everyone's names, smile a lot, and stick to the script," Alex said in a commanding tone that belittled her abilities. Izzy felt her pride hurt. "Mr. Sterling," she interrupted, "your script is quite cliché. If we really did fall in love at first sight, wouldn't there have been something more spontaneous and genuine? Like, the first time we met, I accidentally spilled coffee on your expensive shirt?" She raised her eyebrows, a hint of challenge in her eyes. Alex was taken aback by the sudden and intelligent rebuttal. He wasn't used to being questioned like that by his staff, even if it was temporary. But he had to admit, her idea seemed more interesting. A heated but no less humorous debate ensued as they revised the love story together, adding details that seemed more authentic and suited their assumed personalities. For the first time, a small crack appeared in Alex's wall of control, and a grudging respect began to form. Now, standing face to face with Izzy in his living room, the initial shock of her beauty had worn off a bit, but the confusion remained. Alex tried to regain his usual professionalism. "We should get going," he said, glancing at his watch. "The car's waiting downstairs. We need to get to Lake Forest before the welcome dinner." The black luxury sedan glided smoothly down the highway, heading north toward Chicago. Inside, the atmosphere was awkward. Alex was focused on his tablet, scrolling through financial reports, trying to ignore the presence of the woman sitting next to him. Izzy was looking out the window, her eyes lighting up as she caught the vibrant autumn colors of the trees along the road. She pulled a small notebook and pencil from her bag and began to quickly sketch out images that passed by. Alex glanced at her. The quick yet vibrant lines on the paper intrigued him. "What are you drawing?" he asked, breaking the silence. Izzy looked up, startled. "Oh, just a few ideas. I like the way the light filters through the trees." She wasn't shy about talking about her work. They began a hesitant conversation. Alex asked about her work as a children's book illustrator. Izzy asks about Sterling innovations, about the technologies his company is developing. Alex is surprised by Izzy's intelligent questions and understanding of complex topics. Izzy is also surprised to find that Alex is not just a dry businessman, he has a deep knowledge of art and architecture when she comments on an old building they just passed. The initial tension is gradually replaced by a mutual curiosity. The resort in Lake Forest appears like a fairy tale castle on the quiet shores of Lake Michigan. Luxurious, ancient, and somewhat overwhelming. Alex and Izzy walk into the main lobby, where the Sterling family has gathered. Michael Sterling, Alex's younger brother, a warmer and more generous version of his older brother, rushes to hug Alex. "There I am! Everyone is waiting." Then he turns to Izzy, a bright smile. "And this must be Isabel?" "It's so nice to meet you. Alex keeps talking about you." A blatant lie, but well-intentioned. Chloe Adams, Michael's beautiful and charming fiancée, also greeted Izzy with a friendly hug. But then Eleanor Sterling approached, a regal woman with perfectly coiffed platinum hair and an expensive Chanel outfit. She looked Izzy up and down, her eyes razor-sharp, her appraisal undisguised. "Isabel Rossi," she said, her voice colder than the wind on Lake Michigan. "Alex has never mentioned you before. What do you do?" "I'm a freelance artist, sir," Izzy replied, her voice calm and polite, not at all intimidated by Eleanor's overwhelming presence. She had braced herself for this encounter. "Oh, a freelance artist?" Eleanor raised an eyebrow. "That sounds unstable. Is your family from Chicago?" She continued with a series of questions about family background, education, trying to find a loophole, a mismatch. Izzy, with her intelligence and the information Alex had provided, and a few discreet winks from him, answered with grace, honesty, and a certain air of mystery. She talked about her passion for art, inherited from her grandmother, and how she loved the freedom of her work. She deftly steered the financial questions to safer topics. Eleanor seemed a little taken aback by the young woman's confidence and ability to answer. Alex stood by, silently relieved and grateful for the first time that she had hired the right person. But the peace didn't last long. Victoria Vance appeared, like a cold wind in a tight red dress that showed off her bold curves. Her hair was golden, her lips were red, and her eyes were piercing. She swept past Izzy as if she were invisible, walked straight to Alex, and linked arms with him possessively. "Alex, honey, long time no see." Then she turned to Izzy, a fake smile on her lips. "Oh, sorry, I didn't see you. You must be Isabel? Alex is so reserved. He never talks about you." "It's nice to meet you, Mrs. Vance," Izzy replied with the same polite smile, betraying no emotion. The show had begun. The next few days were a series of social events. Rehearsal dinners, welcome cocktail parties, gatherings of relatives and friends. Alex and Izzy were forced to constantly play the part of a couple in love. They walked hand in hand along the lake. Alex put his arm around Izzy's waist when introducing her to business associates. They looked at each other affectionately when receiving well wishes. At first, everything was stiff and awkward. Alex wasn't used to public displays of affection, and Izzy had always felt uncomfortable lying. But gradually, under the watchful eyes of hundreds of people and the pressure to keep the act under wraps, they began to work together surprisingly well. At the rehearsal dinner, when Michael and Chloe pulled them onto the dance floor, Alex and Izzy found themselves unexpectedly in sync with the slow waltz. Alex, who usually danced only out of social obligation, noticed that Izzy moved with ease and grace. "You dance beautifully," he whispered, a little surprised by his own compliment. "My grandmother taught me a little when I was little." Izzy smiled, a real smile, not a played one. She said dancing was like storytelling with your body. They talked softly as they danced, not about the script or the people around them, but about little things. About the book Izzy was reading, about the new project Alex was working on. Alex realized he liked the sound of her voice, liked the way she tilted her head when she listened. Izzy sensed the tension beneath Alex's calm exterior as he glanced toward his mother and Victoria, who were sitting at the table. She placed her hand on his arm in a silent, comforting gesture. In that moment, the line between the real and the fake seemed to blur. At an outdoor cocktail party, Eleanor deliberately handed Izzy a glass of white wine and asked her opinion on the taste of an expensive Burgundy Chardonnay. Izzy took a sip and admitted honestly, "I'm not very knowledgeable about wine, sir." but I find the label design very interesting, reminiscent of Art Nouveau. She skillfully changed the subject to her own area of expertise, subtly displaying her knowledge of art rather than trying to sound sophisticated. Alex stood nearby, listening to the conversation, and a barely perceptible smile crossed his lips. The conflict began to escalate when Victoria kept trying to disrupt the party. She deliberately spilled a glass of red wine on Izzy's cream-colored dress at the party. Before Izzy could react, Alex stepped in front of her, handed her his silk napkin, and looked at Victoria with icy eyes. "Be careful, Victoria," he said, his voice full of warning. That instinctive, protective action not only angered Victoria, but also made Izzy surprised and her heart beat faster. Alex also recognized the strange emotions within himself. He found himself visibly irritated when an old college friend of Michael's, a handsome playboy, kept pestering Izzy and complimenting her throughout the BBQ by the lake. Alex had stepped forward, put his arm around Izzy's waist, and pulled her possessively close. "Sorry, man. We're having a private conversation," he told the guy, then pulled Izzy away, leaving her confused and surprised at his own obvious jealousy. Things got even more tense when Izzy happened to pass by the break room and overheard Victoria's phone conversation. "Relax," Victoria said confidently to the person on the other end. "I've got that girl's weak spot. A rundown old bookstore in Wicker Park. I have proof that Sterling has been sending her money. If I just drop this at the right time, their act will be over. Eleanor will kick her out of here in a heartbeat." Izzy froze behind the door. Her heart stopped. Victoria knew the truth. The plan was about to be exposed. She wanted to run and tell Alex, but fear and pride held her back. Wouldn't saying it now prove that she was just a hired hand, a problem just like Alex had feared? She decided to stay silent, hoping to get through the last day, the wedding day. Michael and Chloe's wedding day took place under the blue sky and bright yellow sunshine of late summer. The scene on the shore of Lake Michigan was as beautiful as a romantic painting. Vows were exchanged, tears of happiness rolled down, applause and congratulations rang out. Izzy stood beside Alex, hand in hand, playing the role of the happy fiancé, but her heart was heavy with anxiety about Victoria's threat. The wedding reception was held in a large garden overlooking the lake. The atmosphere was cheerful, the music was melodious, everyone raised their glasses to toast the newlyweds. As Alex was busy with some important business associates, Izzy broke away to get a glass of lemonade. She had just turned away from the bar when Victoria stopped her, smiling, but her eyes cold. "We need to talk, Miss Rossi. Or should I call you actress?" Victoria said softly, her voice dripping with sarcasm. Izzy tried to keep her cool. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Oh, don't pretend," Victoria sneered. "I know everything. I know Alex hired you. Who do you think this clumsy act is fooling? Especially me?" Victoria pulled out her phone and opened a screenshot. What appeared to be an email exchange between Sarah Jenkins and the mutual friend who had introduced Izzy, mentioning fee and role. A penniless artist, desperate to save his grandmother's crumbling old bookstore. How pathetic. You'd better get out of here before I show this to Eleanor and everyone else. Izzy felt her blood run cold. She was scared, embarrassed, but most of all, deeply offended. "You have no right to," she stammered. "I have every right to expose a fraud like you," Victoria smirked. Just then, Alex appeared. He had noticed Victoria approaching Izzy and had a premonition that something was wrong. Seeing Izzy's pale face and Victoria's triumphant smile, he knew he had come at the right time. "What's going on here, Victoria?" Alex's voice was no longer cold and distant, but contained a clear tension and anger. Victoria turned around, holding up the phone like a trophy. "Look, Alex, look at who your beloved fiancé really is. She's just a gold digger you hired to act. She lied to all of us." His voice was shrill, attracting the attention of those standing nearby. Mrs. Eleanor, as if she had been waiting, immediately approached, her face showing suspicion and annoyance. All eyes were on them. The happy atmosphere of the party suddenly quieted down. This was the moment Alex feared the most. His perfect shield plan had officially fallen apart. He could take the easy way out, admit to part of the truth, say it was all a misunderstanding, or even blame Izzy entirely, say she had lied to him to protect her image in front of her mother and the business world. That was what the old Alex Sterling would have done. Cut his losses, do damage control. But when he looked into Izzy's green eyes, Eyes that were watery, not from fear, but from hurt, and there was a surprising resilience in them. He knew he couldn't do that. He remembered her smile as they danced, the intelligence in their conversations, the way she quietly comforted him, the jealousy he'd felt when other people got close to her. Those feelings weren't staged. They were real. And the woman standing before him, being publicly humiliated, was not a temporary employee, but someone who had touched his seemingly frozen heart. He didn't just want to protect the plan, he wanted to protect her. Alex took a deep breath, facing Victoria, then his mother, and finally the curious guests around him. His voice rang out, sharp but completely calm, without a trace of hesitation. "Victoria, you're wrong." He looked straight into his ex-girlfriend's eyes. "Isabel isn't cheating on anyone." He paused, letting everyone take it in. "Yes, the way we started this relationship was a little unconventional." He glanced quickly at his mother, who was gaping in shock. "There were reasons why we kept our relationship a secret at first, but..." He turned to look at Izzy, his eyes now filled with a tenderness and sincerity that he had never expected to show. "My feelings for her were completely real. There was no lie." He stepped forward, took Izzy's trembling hand, and squeezed it gently. The warmth from his hand transmitted a strange sense of security to her. "I love Isabel, Rossi," he declared, his voice resonant throughout the garden. "And I feel like the luckiest man in the world that she agreed to stay by my side, no matter what." He turned back to look at Victoria, his eyes sharp. "As for Izzy's personal circumstances or her grandmother's bookstore, that's none of your business. But just so you know, if Izzy needs anything, whether it's saving a bookstore or conquering the world, I'll always be there to support her. Not because of a contract, but because I love her and care about her happiness more than anything." Alex's sudden and emotional statement was like a bomb that exploded the tense atmosphere. Victoria turned pale, her red lips pressed tightly together in anger and humiliation. Eleanor was stunned, looking from her son to the girl she had just judged. Michael and Chloe looked at each other, a knowing and meaningful smile on their lips. As for Izzy, she looked up at Alex, tears starting to roll down her cheeks, but this time not from hurt or fear, but from emotion, surprise, and a fragile happiness that had just begun to blossom. The curtain had fallen, but a true love story seemed to have just begun. There was a moment of silence, then murmurs began to rise from the crowd of guests. Victoria Vance, unable to bear the humiliation and the curious and pitying looks, turned and almost ran from the party, her high heels clicking loudly on the cobblestones. Eleanor Sterling was the first to regain her composure, though her face still showed shock and displeasure. She tugged at Alex's arm, motioning him to a more secluded corner of the garden. "Alexander, what the hell are you talking about? Falling in love with her? Do you know what you're doing? What's the contract? Did you hire her?" Her voice was low, but her questioning was fierce. Alex faced his mother, this time without the usual avoidance or annoyance. He calmly explained, not needing to go into detail about the original reason or the contract. He just focused on the most important truth. "Mom, I know this is hard to believe. At first, there were complicated reasons why Izzy and I kept it a secret, but the feelings that have grown between us are real. I really love Izzy, Mom. I love her intelligence, her kindness, and her strength. I hope you can give her a chance." Eleanor looked deep into her son's eyes, searching for any sign of deception or impulsiveness, but she saw only determination and a sincerity she rarely saw in Alex. Despite her many questions and doubts, she temporarily fell silent, a rare concession. "I need time to think about this, Alexander." When Alex turned back to Izzy, Michael and Chloe were there, smiling brightly. "Congratulations, brother!" Michael patted Alex on the shoulder. "We knew there was something special between you two. The way you looked at her didn't look like you were acting." Chloe hugged Izzy. "Welcome to the family, Izzy, even if it was a little Hollywood at first." Their warm, non-judgmental support made Izzy feel much lighter. The wedding party continued, but Alex and Izzy were now the center of attention in a completely different way. The whispers were still there, but mixed in with curiosity, admiration, and a little romanticism. Izzy felt like she was on cloud nine, both relieved that the truth had been revealed, even if not in the way she wanted, and confused by Alex's public confession and intense affection. It had all happened so fast, so unexpectedly. That evening, after most of the guests had left and the resort had returned to its usual quiet, Alex and Izzy had their first private moment since the tense confrontation. They strolled along the lake under the silver moonlight, the silence overwhelming, but no longer the awkwardness of strangers, but the hesitation of two people who had just crossed an important boundary. "Alex," Izzy spoke first, her voice still trembling slightly. "What you said this afternoon, in front of everyone. Are you sure?" Alex stopped, turning to face her. The moonlight illuminated his face, softening the sharp lines that usually characterized it. "I'm sure, Izzy." Every word, he looked straight into her eyes, his expression more serious and sincere than ever. "I know it all started with a lie, a selfish plan of mine. I'm truly sorry for dragging you into this mess, for putting you in such an awkward and hurtful position." He reached up, hesitated, and then gently brushed a lock of hair from her cheek. "But all these days with you, pretending to be your lover, I realized I wasn't pretending anymore. I really care about you, Izzy. I like the way you see the world, your intelligence, your independence. I think I'm falling in love with you." The last confession was awkward, because Alex Sterling wasn't used to expressing his feelings so directly. Izzy felt her heart pounding. "Me too, Alex," she whispered, her voice full of emotion. "I'm drawn to you too, not just because you're a successful CEO, but because of your intelligence, how protective you are of me, and the times when I see you vulnerable and lonely." She paused, a flicker of uncertainty in her eyes. "But we're so different, Alex. Your world and mine. Can a relationship like this exist in real life?" Alex understood her concern. He pulled a check from his vest pocket, a check for $15,000. "This is the money I owe you under our contract, Izzy. I want you to take it to settle the bookstore." He placed the check in her hand. "But I hope this isn't the end of our story. I want the chance to get to know you seriously, no longer as boss and hired hand, no longer as a role. I want to date you, Isabel Rossi, if you'll let me." Izzy looked at the check in her hand, then up at Alex. He wasn't forcing, he wasn't demanding. He was just making a sincere request. When they returned to Chicago, everyday life immediately pulled them back to reality. The gap between Alex's swanky downtown penthouse and Izzy's cozy Wicker Park apartment seemed larger than ever. Izzy immediately used the money Alex gave her to pay a new deposit and began planning renovations for the Story Nook. She threw herself into her work, illustrating new orders and repainting old bookshelves by hand. The work helped her temporarily forget her chaotic emotions, but the image of Alex, his confession, and doubts about the future were always in her mind. Was his word sincere? Or was it just a momentary reaction to a dramatic situation? Alex returned to the grind of work at Sterling Innovations. Meetings, business strategies, profit numbers, everything went on as usual, but he felt a strange void. The large office seemed emptier. The nighttime city from above no longer shimmered as before. He missed Izzy's bright smile, her intelligent wit, the peaceful feeling of sitting next to her in silence. He realized that absolute control and perfectly laid out plans could not fill the void in his heart. He called Izzy a few times, short, awkward conversations, mostly about work and the bookstore. He knew words were not enough. Alex Sterling understood that to convince an independent and somewhat skeptical woman like Izzy, actions had to speak louder than words. One Saturday afternoon, instead of going to the golf course or attending a business event, he drove his sports car out of the swanky downtown area and toward Wicker Park, a neighborhood of historic brick buildings, independent shops, and a bohemian artistic vibe that was completely different from his own. He parked a few blocks away and walked to the Story Nook. The small bookstore was nestled between a used record store and a small coffee shop. The front door was ajar, and soft jazz music was playing from inside. Through the dusty glass door, he saw Izzy. She was wearing paint-stained overalls, her hair pulled back into a messy bun, struggling to close a heavy old oak bookcase. Her face was covered in sweat, but her eyes sparkled with joy and determination as she watched her little place come to life. Alex took a deep breath and pushed the door open. The small bell on the door jingled. Izzy turned, startled, her eyes widening in surprise as she saw him standing there, dressed in his more casual attire, khakis, navy cashmere sweater, no longer the powerful CEO, but simply Alex. "Hi, Izzy," he said softly, smiling. "I was passing by and thought you might need an extra hand with that bookshelf." Izzy froze for a few seconds, confused and defensive. "Alex, what are you doing here?" "I came to see you," he said simply. He walked over to the bookshelf. "This looks like it could use 2 people." Without waiting for her to answer, he rolled up the sleeves of his sweater and began examining the misaligned wooden joint. The sudden appearance and the complete lack of planning on Alex's part took Izzy by surprise. But seeing the sincerity in his eyes, seeing him not hesitate to get his hands dirty with the repair work, the defensive wall in her heart began to collapse. She laughed. "Okay, helper. You hold this end, I'll try to hammer the other bolt in." Together, they struggled with the old bookshelf. At first, there was a silence focused on the work. Then gradually, there were jokes, laughter. After the bookshelf was fixed, they sat on the floor among the piles of old books, tired but happy. They began to talk, this time completely open, without any barriers of contract or role. Alex talked about the pressure of having to take care of the family business, about the loneliness he often felt in the midst of flashy success. Izzy shared about her love for the bookstore, about her small dreams, about the fear of almost losing it. "Izzy," Alex said after a moment of silence, his voice serious. "I have a proposal. Sterling Innovations has a community support fund. We could sponsor weekend children's story readings here, or help you build a more professional online sales website for the bookstore. This is purely a business proposal, a partnership, not a charity. I believe in the potential of this place, and in your talent." He respected her independence, not wanting her to feel like she was receiving charity. Izzy looked at him, considering. This proposal would not only help the bookstore grow, but also create an opportunity for them to continue meeting and working together on a more equal footing. She smiled. "I think it's a great idea, Alex." A few months later. The Story Nook had taken on a new look. Still cozy and old-fashioned, but more spacious and tidy. The weekend story readings attracted a lot of families in the neighborhood. The online sales website designed by the Sterling Innovations team is operating effectively, bringing in a stable source of income. Liam cannot hide his joy and gratitude. One late autumn Saturday afternoon, the gentle golden sunlight shone through the large glass windows of the bookstore. Alex and Izzy were sitting together in a quiet reading corner. No longer CEO and fake wife, nor exactly business partners, they were simply a couple enjoying a peaceful moment together. Alex was engrossed in a children's picture book with beautiful illustrations drawn by Izzy herself. Izzy leaned on his shoulder, her notebook open on her lap, quickly sketching a portrait of Alex with a gentle smile on her lips. Occasionally, Mrs. Eleanor still called Alex, her tone less critical, once even asking about that cute artist. Michael and Chloe had become regular customers of the bookstore. Alex closed the book, turned to look at Izzy, his eyes filled with love. "You know," he said softly, "hiring, it was probably the best business decision I've ever made in my life." Izzy laughed, looking up at him, her smile bright. "I think," she replied, her voice full of meaning, "it was definitely the best personal decision you've ever made." They looked deep into each other's eyes. No words needed to be said. The worldly differences, the awkward beginnings, the misunderstandings and prejudices, all of that was left behind. They had found each other, found true love in the most unexpected place, and together they had built a simple, lasting happiness in the heart of vibrant Chicago. The little bell on the door jingled as a few guests entered, bringing with it the chill of autumn and the warmth of stories waiting to be discovered, just like their own unexpected love story.
I hope you enjoyed this thrilling journey. On a scale of 1 to 10, how would you rate this story? Let me know in the comments below. Your feedback inspires more epic tales.